Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our June 2nd meeting of the Board of Podiatric Medicine. I'd like to welcome everybody here. This is our last meeting, of course, was at the Western University campus of Health Science in Pomona. And I'd like to again publicly thank Dr. Larry Harkless for hosting us at that meeting, and also a congratulations to him on his upcoming retirement from that position at the university. So we're going to move on to public comments. Note, this board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda for a future meeting. So if any of our guests would like to introduce themselves, that would be welcome.
Good morning, Board of Podiatric Medicine. My name is Dean Garfilo. I'm the 2.5-month-old new director for the Department of Consumer Affairs. So glad I'm able to be here and introduce myself and share some thoughts about how I hope we're going to be able to work collaboratively in protecting consumers, but also ensuring the safe practice of podiatric medicine. Very briefly about myself, prior to coming to DCA 2.5 months ago, I spent the majority of my career as staff for different legislators in the Assembly. Most recently, specifically Assemblymember Rob Bonta. He represents the East Bay cities of Oakland, San Leandro, and Alameda. Before that, I lobbied for the California Medical Association for about 3 years. I was the liaison to the Medical Board of California. Previous to that, I was Chief of Staff for Assemblymember Warren Foratani. He represents the areas of Long Beach, Gardena, parts of LA. And then previous to that, I was Senior Leg Staff for former Majority Leader Alberto Tirico. He's an East Bay representative as well. Tri-City areas, Fremont and Newark. Long way for me to say that this opportunity, thank the governor for this opportunity. Didn't know when I was a commissioner on the athletic commission, nor the liaison to the medical board. Zoom forward a few years forward, I'd be the director of the Department of Consumer Affairs. During my stints as a commissioner and also, like I said, the liaison to the medical board, welcome those opportunities in the sense of, again, of an opportunity to try to strengthen consumer protections. Arguably, the athletic commission is a little different in that not necessarily a whole lot of consumers to protect per se, but ultimately that's about trying to ensure the protections of the fighters primarily. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one of my most fond memories as commissioner happened right in this court area here, where I was able to present a pension check to an ex-boxer. I'll carry that with me throughout my entire career. One thing I would like to mention about my time in front of the legislature as a lobbyist previous to coming to DCA, I tried to make sure that I took a collaborative approach in terms of trying to creatively solve vaccine issues as a leg staff, as a lobbyist. Similarly, as director of DCA, I know that there's going to be numerous vaccine issues specific to this board, the other 38, and my approach is going to be one in which I'm going to try to hear all the different sides of a vaccine issue, because as in my belief is that as you get towards making a decision, if you've done that deliberative, all stakeholder approach, you can have confidence in the decision given that deliberative approach. You're making decisions on a whim. You're not just making decisions without full complement of information from, again, as many stakeholders as possible. And I look forward to partnering with the board towards the issues that you folks face, not only day to day, but mid and long term. The first 1.5 months that I've been in my first 1.5 months as director, I've primarily been in front of the committees specific to DCA in the legislature, sub 4s in both houses, BMP in both houses, And I just wanted to make sure that folks knew that I wasn't taking for granted the existing relationships that I've had with many of the different staff and legislators specific to DCA, specific to BNP. And then now that I'm 2.5 months into being director, I'm starting to really have fun in the sense that I'm able to visit with the different boards, obviously with you folks today, the different executive officers, bureau chiefs, because ultimately that's where I think I'm going to be able to have a true role in, again, consumer protections for the entire state. I'm looking forward to quarterly meetings with all DCA programs where we're going to be able to knowledge share. We're going to be able to hopefully establish some best practices, because while arguably the most critical objectives of each of the different programs is licensing and enforcement, because there are in fact 39 different programs, there may be 39 different approaches to that. Hopefully through experience, through discussion amongst all 39 programs, we can in fact knowledge share, we can in fact establish best practices in the vein of consumer protections for California. Thank you all for your interest, commitment towards consumer protections, towards strengthening the practice of podiatric medicine here in California. I believe that we've seen in different ways how California has been has been the bellwether for policies nationally and arguably globally. I hope that DCA, in collaboration with you, the other boards, we can be the standard bearer specific to consumer protections globally as well. I know you have a busy agenda in front of you. More than happy to take a few questions, but in no way do I want to interfere with the timing of your day today. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Garofalo. Any questions?
No, I just thank you and welcome aboard. We look forward to working with you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I continue with our agenda, I would like to call roll. Who's recording it? Start from Dr. Mansdorf.
Neil Mansdorf, present.
Christina Dixon, present.
Michael Zaff, present.
Darlene Elliott, present.
Is that a quorum?
4 out of 7, yes.
Okay. Back to our public comments. Does anybody else in the audience like to make a public comment or introduce yourselves? With that, we're going to move on to approval of the minutes from the meeting held March 3rd, 2017. Do I hear any motions to approve the minutes?
Mansdorf, motion to approve.
Second, Christina Dixon.
Any objections? So approved. Thank you. We're going to receive a few updates now. First one is from Cures. We have a representative from the Department of Justice. If you'd come forward and introduce yourself.
Good morning. Mike Small, the program manager for the CURES program with the California Department of Justice. As you know, CURES is the database that is a repository of all Schedule 2, 3, and 4 prescriptions dispensed in the state of California. It is made available to the prescribers and dispensers in California for the purposes of assisting safe prescribing and to enhance safe prescribing. The database, we probably ingest about between 145, 165,000 prescriptions a day. The database itself is about a terabyte in size. We built the new CURES 2.0 to be as clinically assistive as possible, and in attempting to do that, we invoke some big data analytics. So every single night, we ingest this new data, and we deduplicate it against the existing terabyte of data. We then parse out the contemporary scripts based on date filled and day supply, and then we calculate the medicinal value of those scripts. And for any individual who reaches one of 5 what we can consider at-risk patient thresholds, we will send an alert to that prescriber every single morning. And we generate about 250,000 alerts a day. The thresholds are if the patient is receiving more than 100 morphine milligram equivalents of opioids a day, if the patient has been on opioids for more than 90 consecutive days, if the patient's on more than 40 MMEs of methadone, if the patient is on both benzodiazepines and opioids, and if the patient is follows this high prescription-seeking behavior pattern, what we call 6, 6, and 6, seeing 6 doctors and/or 6 pharmacies within 6 months. We'll send alerts to those prescribers so they can hopefully take note and work on attenuating the therapy for the patient's safety. We also give the clinician the ability to communicate with each other. In other words, if there's 2 or 3 prescribers, say a psychiatrist is prescribing benzos and the primary is prescribing the opioids, we give an internal messaging capability so they can talk to each other in an encrypted fashion. They're the only ones, the sender and the receiver are the only ones who could see the message. In order to attenuate, talk about the therapy that they're both involved with this individual patient. And the reason we designed that was because we recognize that there's a gap in communications and the HR systems as well as email systems. Typically, one healthcare system and A and healthcare system B, their EHRs don't exchange information, their email systems don't connect. So we try to bridge that gap for the safety of the patient's purposes and provide those services. We also give prescribers the ability to enter a flag if they have a compact or a contract with a patient for exclusive treatment purposes, say he's on addiction treatment or certain pain medication treatment that the doctor only wants that patient to get prescriptions from him for safety's sake. If that patient presents himself to another doctor, the doctor can note that if he sees that in the cures, and then he can, communicate with that compacting doctor if he so chooses. So we're very proud of the big data analytics. We've been able to provide some clinically assistive features for the community to try and help in everybody's efforts to knock down this epidemic. So I do have some numbers for you. For the months of as of the month of March, there were 1,081 registered podiatrists using the CARE system, and in the month of March, they had ran 611 patient activity reports, and there were 251 accesses to the system by DPMs for those 611 reports that were sought. So there is some utilization of the system from your community, and I'd be happy to work with you on enticing full and complete utilization as needed.
Time for questions?
Sure.
From time to time, we read reports about practitioners that have apparently overprescribed narcotics. Is the system, how foolproof is the system for catching those early?
One of the problems, our system provides robust prescriber behavior reports and dispenser behavior reports. So a board or a law enforcement agency can see those. And to, of course, for law enforcement would only be interested in criminal prescribing. Like the kind of doctors that sit in Starbucks and write scripts for $250 each. That would be the law enforcement interest. The vast majority of overprescribing, I believe, is probably the more cavalier type that was imbued through these years of training that opioids were not so dangerous, and the whole community was imbued with the sense that it was safe to prescribe opioids. And now as we learn that that's changed, there's a great deal of need for academic detailing rather than law enforcement activity. We just, in conjunction with the University of California, Davis, we're just submitted a grant proposal where we could, if we are awarded that grant, we'll work with Los Angeles and Humboldt counties, figuring that a large county and a small county would be a good indication of local variances as well as challenges, to develop analytics that could very cost-effectively pinpoint prescribers in need of academic detailing for the public health officer of those counties. So he can then visit and provide updated education and information about the more recent realizations that opioids maybe should not be prescribed at such high levels, for chronic pain. And then, of course, we want to measure the success of that detailing. So there are avenues to be explored in terms of reducing high levels of prescribing that are not criminal in nature, and we're attempting to address those.
I have a question. Can you talk about the efforts to get more pharmacies involved in using the Cure system? Because it seems like to me, while to Dr. Zapp's question, if you're prescribing, you have to have someone who's filling, right? And so is
Absolutely.
the back end the way to kind of get to what he's asking about? with
Actually,
regards to
it's the
prescribing?
pharmacists that are the real power users of the system. They, in fact, probably inquire the system. For instance, in March, pharmacists made 533,993 inquiries to the Cure system, as opposed to medical doctors made 221,693 inquiries. And as you know, medical doctors outnumber pharmacists probably 3 to 1. So given that inverse ratio, I think that's a pretty high utilization rate on the pharmacist's part.
If I, as a practitioner, prescribe more than some set amount, how would you notify me that you're looking at it?
Well, the only notification my system would send you would be if your patient exceeded those safety thresholds that I talked about earlier. And that would be in the form of an alert to you on your dashboard. So you would have to sign into the system to be able to, it would be staring at you in the face, it'd be the first thing you see, but you would have to sign in the system to see that. We contemplated the possibilities of saying an email or a letter, but of course, due to those kinds of messaging being out in the open, we couldn't put anything substantive into those kinds of mediums. So we thought the best place would be provide the specific and detailed information on the dashboard for you.
Question. So you were talking about podiatry in general, about the use. What are the other divisions doing? Are they seeing a high usage rate as well, or are we compared, in that ballpark?
Well, I think in context, you have good usage because there are far fewer podiatrists than there are pharmacists in the state of California. I didn't do the ratio calculations. I apologize. Maybe I should have. But for instance, the registered nurse and nurse midwife, furnishing nurses and nurse midwives, they made 10,036 inquiries into the system during the month of March, and osteopaths made 5,241. And physician assistants made 6,924, and you know the relative sizes of those communities. So, yeah, I'd say you're probably on par in terms of utilization. Yeah.
And any of the other divisions doing anything different to get the word out, or is there something that we could be? I know we
Well, we worked strongly with all the associations as well as DCA at the exec level. So, like I say, anything you'd like to do, I've never turned down a invitation to go speak and present on cures and the use of cures and how I traveled up and down the state while we were in build promoting the future usage of the system and also how to sign into it and register for it. And we'd be more than happy to provide any presentation at any time on how to use the system and what the data presents.
Thank you.
Question, we've got about 2,100 podiatrists in the state of California. We currently have half of our licensees registered for something that became mandatory last year. What are we doing to try and encourage our remaining licensees to register? I had thought about sending out when we have our licensees relicense, that we include a flyer that stating that it's mandatory. Are we sending emails directly?
Yeah, and it's mandatory for a holder, a prescriber who has both a state license and a DEA certificate. So I don't know what the relative ratio that might be.
Follows pretty closely.
Most do. I have. I'll be glad to work with you. I have with your staff. I have brochures on how to register. I have brochures on just cures in general. I'm happy to present. I engage in a phone call about monthly with the association, and talk about the stats and where things are at. So I'll do everything I can. Cures, you have to understand, is just now been authorized staff after all these years. And so it's kind of been me, really, and I've been kind of stretched a little bit. So the marketing side probably hasn't been as robust as it could or should be. But I also remind you that it's your staff's responsibility for enforcement for the registration requirement, not DOJ. So I'm kind of in the assist mode rather than the primary. Yeah.
Okay.
Are any licensing agencies taking cures registration into account for relicensing?
That I don't know. That has not been shared to me, so I don't know.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Small.
My pleasure.
Very nice report.
Anytime.
Next, we'll be moving on to a budget update from the DCA Budget Division. Karen Munoz. And
Good morning, I'm Karen Munoz. I'm Maureen O'Connor, a budget manager at DCA Budget Office. Today we were asked to present the board's budget to you guys. We'll do that as best as we can. You should have in your packet the projections and fund conditions, any supporting docs that we provided the board. It looks like your board has been pretty conservative with their budget, with a nice reversion at the end of the years. Currently, you're projected to revert at a 21%, and that's approximately $267,000. At this time, when I did projections on your board's budget, I'm using a prior year ratio, but more assertive in the fact that where you guys were at last year, fiscal month 13, and currently. So I'm pretty confident on the projections at this time at fiscal month 10. And plugging that into your current fund condition, it does show that although you do show a decline in your reserve, it still, shows an imbalance. But going forward, if we do a 2% on your current budget, your funds should be solvent up until 2021. If we use that kind of a past year, how you've looked at and how you're consistently reverting. Do you have any questions or concerns on your budget?
Any questions?
When will the 17-18 budget process begin?
The 17-18 process, that being budget year, current year, we've been working actually on both of them throughout the year, but it starts fiscal, July 1. 17-18 is already in the governor's budget, and we'll be working on 18-19.
Okay. Will we see that?
Will you see?
The projections for 17-18?
For 17-18, you do have a budget already in the governor's budget. You'll see that in your the fund condition provided, you have a budget of 1.4. Projection-wise, it's just the start of the year, we always project to budget, and then we kind of go off of what you expended last year, prior years, and what the ratio of that is, and base it off of that. I would assume that you would be probably projecting around the same as this year going forward, or close to it, because the trend that you guys have shown in the past 4 or 5 years, or even beyond, has been very fluent in the same amount.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Ms. Munoz and Ms. O'Connor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Report. Next, we're getting an update from the MBC on proposed legislation regarding jurisdictional separation of the Board of Podiatric Medicine and the MBC. And this
Hello.
would be Jennifer Simon.
Yeah, Jennifer Simoes. I'm the Chief of Legislation for the Medical Board of California. So SB 798 is the Medical Board Sunset Bill, and that's the bill basically that includes language that was requested by the Medical Board, and it also includes language that was requested by that Senate Business and Professions Committee decided to put in there. So as you said, one of the sets of language that was put in there is related to the Board of Podiatric Medicine and making it clear that the Board of Podiatric Medicine is its own board and separate from the Medical Board. There is some differences in this bill from the last bill. The last bill moved Board of Podiatric Medicine to its own section. This version of the bill keeps it exactly where it is now and just makes changes to take out references to the Medical Board. I know that we've had a lot of conversations on this in the past, and the Medical Board really appreciates the Board of Podiatric Medicine's willingness to work with the Medical Board, and especially its executive officers work on this. We've met many times, and we hope that we're in a good place now, that we've kind of worked together and worked out hopefully all the kinks, and our bill's kind of moving along. So it's just recently made it out of the Senate, and it's in the Assembly now. And we're just here to kind of answer any questions and just really to thank you for your support and work on this. So that concludes my update, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Jennifer, just one question.
Okay.
I know there's a lot of skepticism about the shared services once this jurisdiction separation happens. Can we assure the board that the shared services is going to continue to the same level as it is right now?
Yeah, so kind of as the Medical Board sees this, and I know there's been a difference in opinion, but we don't think anything will change if this bill goes into, gets signed into law. We see everything happening the same as it is now, and that includes the shared services. I think that there's been conversations back and forth, like, should we formalize this? Should we do a contract? Should we'd be willing to kind of do anything, but we have no intention of changing any of the level of services. We provide shared services for other boards, and we do provide shared services now, and we plan on continuing on providing the same exact services that are being provided now.
with the other boards and the shared services, do you have a formal agreement?
I think some of them we do and some of them we don't, and it kind of depends on the board's preference. So we'd be happy, and I know that Kim and Mr. Naslin have talked a little bit about what would be the best avenue, but we'd kind of be happy to do whatever you guys think is best for your board.
Okay, and then can you just talk a little bit about how the difference in the placement of the legislation makes the difference? Because I know you said previously it was separated out in its own section.
Yeah, so before, I think when Senate BMP drafted it, they drafted it in its own section, so it was kind of out of the healing arts placement, and it was, creating your whole new section. What this basically does is it keeps everything where it is now. It's exactly in the same place in the law, and it just basically makes the word changes from a lot of our stuff said division, and it changes it to board, which would mean the Board of Podiatric Medicine. So everything is staying the same. It's just making those little wordsmithing changes to make it clear that it's your board, not our division.
Okay, thank you.
When would the separation go into effect? What date?
So it would go into effect on January 1st, 2018.
And I think after that, there's going to probably be some other code sections that need to be sweeped up. So we'll work definitely together and figure that out.
And I think they got some changes that you guys had submitted and some changes that we have submitted. So, our sunset bill is definitely still a work in progress. So it's not like, okay, it's too late to make any changes. We will be making changes. We have a lot of big changes for licensing and stuff that are going to require more changes. So if you see something, Brian or your board, that's like, oh no, this needs to be changed, we can definitely take them. Sarah Mason is the person at Senate BMP that's working on this bill, but I'd be happy to take changes to her. She's pretty good. She'll make a change. We want to get this in the best shape as possible. There's always an opportunity to fix something if we don't catch it, but we'd rather catch it if we can.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Do those reports need any acceptance? Okay, so we're going to move on to the Executive Officer's Report. 4 sections. Mr. Naslin.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Saff. So we have licensing program up first, and we have Andrea, who's a little under the weather. I know how that feeling is today. So I'm going to punt it over to Andrea, and she'll give you an update on the licensing program as the committee met.
So good morning and happy Friday. So we'll jump into the licensing statistics of new licenses issued and renewals during fiscal year 16-17 quarter 3 between January 1st and March 31st, 2017. The following is a breakdown of new licenses issued over the last 3 fiscal years. In 13-14, there were 69 permanent licenses, 14-15 had 70, 15-16, 79, and 16-17, 43 to date, for a grand total of 261 newly licensed DPMs in the last 4 fiscal years. The breakdown of licensing data includes number of initial applications received that are currently pending, and of the 30 pending applications, 33 candidates have recently completed their packages. Next is the renewal data. In the month of January, 93 renewals were mailed, with 72 renewed by end of month. February had 91 renewals mailed, with 75 renewals by end of month, and March had 79 renewals mailed, with 75 renewed by the end of month. Delinquent renewal notices were mailed to those that did not comply with renewal requirements 30 days after expiration. Next is the resident data. BPM currently has 37 first year, 37 second year, and 41 third year residents, bringing the resident license total count to 120. Next, we have an update to the continuing competence pathway. At the March 3rd board meeting, the board decided to handle this on a case-by-case basis. BPM staff is working with the Breeze OIS team to add BPC Section 2496 back to the renewal form and will continue to track any calls related to this pathway. If a licensee chooses to use the successful completion within the past 5 years of an extended course of study approved by the board, staff will request that the licensee provide additional information and will then forward to the licensing committee for further review and determination. And there's been no phone calls to date regarding this pathway. Moving on, we have an online license renewal functionality update. BPM is once again moving forward with online renewals, and staff is working closely with our Breeze business analysts and developers to get this functionality working, and the go-live date is tentatively set for end of June 2017. And then we have the BPM Timeline.
Question about that?
Yes.
Well, after June 17th, will the only way to renew it be online?
No. You could still
That's
send
an
it.
option.
Finally, we have the applications for approval of the California Podiatric Residency Programs. There are 19 separate California postgraduate clinical training programs that seek approval of applications of residency programs offered for the 2017-2018 academic year. The licensing committee reviewed and recommended the board approve the 19 programs at the last committee meeting held on May 10th.
I have a question. So Neil asked a very poignant question about licensing and how do we make sure that all of our prescribing podiatrists are renewing and getting into cures. So are we planning to send out some sort of notification to them just to remind them of that? And then do we know how many of our total population would meet that criteria to have to mandatorily enroll in cures?
We can definitely add a flyer into the renewal packet. We don't have one right now, but
Okay.
we can add a cures
Perfect.
reminder. And I'd have to look into the numbers. I'm not sure off the top of my head how many are required.
Because I think we would want to know how many should be enrolled, right, to make sure that we're meeting that expectation.
I don't know that we have any statistics of number of podiatrists that also have prescribing licenses. That BPM isn't responsible for that.
No?
No,
But would we want to know that?
it's not a requirement for licensing, though.
No, I'm saying, but for the cures, because when he did the report, he said there's, 1,081, and we're talking about how many total podiatrists we have. Do we know how many should be enrolled in cures?
I think the board could probably poll Department of Justice and what their numbers are, number of California licensees.
Mm-hmm.
We could probably get the total number of prescribers
Okay,
and work backwards that way.
yeah. Just to make sure we're targeting who we need to target is all I'm asking.
Right, I'll follow up on that.
Okay, thank you.
Also, are we doing CME analysis this year? Licensees and compliance?
Believe so. We haven't done one yet. Me and Brian have to talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be coming up shortly here, probably on our next board meeting. We'll entertain that and put it back to committee.
Thanks. Yeah, I know sometimes we don't have enough staff to do that annually, but
Right.
I think we're back up to strength now. Thanks.
Finally.
Quick question for me. On the residency program, I know this went through our committee, and there was an explanation that we actually go through the Council of Podiatric Medical, and then they fill out this application. Is there any way, listening to the cures and trying, is there any way to maybe change the application where we're actually, because this is more of a self-evaluation, they check off, and we're just kind of going off with the council. Is there any way that we can get a staff signature saying that they've checked off that this is correct information, and then maybe add something to our application about they should be doing a seminar on cures as part of the application, especially for us to have a residency program, and maybe that's an avenue that we can get more information out to them. I'm not sure if that's possible or if that's in our jurisdiction.
I'd have to do some research on that, and I would like to check with the medical boards and see what they do. Maybe we can parallel if it's a little different and get that information that you're looking for.
Right. Well, because when I was researching and looking at all the residency programs, it was a little difficult to go to the council's website and trying to pull that information. So
Right.
either we have a link on ours so people can at least go directly to it, might be easier as well.
Okay.
But just so it's out there and people have access to it. Thank you.
And applications were only sent to the programs that were on the CPME website as approved programs in California.
Thank you.
And just a point of information, all of the residencies are approved by the Council on Podiatric Medical Education, and every 5 years there is an on-site inspection of the residency to make sure that they're compliant with all of the requirements and regulations.
Okay. Thank you.
So I believe, do we need a motion to?
Yes, to approve the qualifying residency program.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve all.
Second, Christina Dixon.
All right, let's start with Dr. Mansdorf.
Oh, you need discussion first.
Discussion.
No.
Discussion, public comment.
Any discussion? Any public comments? Hearing none.
Mansdorf, aye.
Dixon, aye.
Zaff, aye.
Elliot, aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Does that conclude the licensing report?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Linda. Next, we'll move on to the enforcement program update. Ms. DeAngelis.
Good morning. The first section of my report has to do with the statistical data for the fiscal year 16-17 third quarter. It compares the data to last year's third quarter to kind of give an idea, although the numbers vary often so much that we don't really see a clear picture till the end of the fiscal year. So first I'm going to go over those statistics, and if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to interrupt me as I go along. So for the complaints, we received 42 complaints between January 1st and March 31st of this year. This is a 45% increase over last year when we got 29 complaints. However, for year to date, it's looking pretty comparable overall to last year. And also we were within the targets set by DCA for the average time to assign these cases.
Excuse me, Bethany, could you get a little closer to the mic for the purposes of the internet?
I'll try to talk louder.
Or talk louder, right?
Investigations, 38 desk investigations were assigned and 35 desk investigations were closed. Processing time has gone down by 35% over third quarter of last year. Only 2 investigations were assigned to the field, which is an 86% decrease over third quarter of last year. Last year, we were going through catching up on a backlog because of a staffing shortage. And so I believe that is why we're looking at, we had such a higher numbers going into the field at that time as she was catching up. Julie Brown's been doing a great job of keeping us completely caught up now on our desk investigations, and so those are being processed really quickly. Also, they're having a very high vacancy rate in the division investigation right now, so cases going out into the field are taking a little bit longer to complete based on the staffing shortages. But overall, if we take the desk and field investigations together and we take those average days, we're still really close to the DCA target set. So fortunately, we've got a great analyst working on the inside to get our numbers looking really good. Disciplinary data, 2 cases were initiated with the Attorney General over that quarter, which is a 100% increase when only 1 case was initiated last year. 1 final order went into effect. It took 1,341 days to complete. I know that sounds like a really long time. Sometimes these cases, once they hit the disciplinary phase, there's a lot of legal delays as part of the process that can lengthen these out, and sometimes the investigations themselves are really complex, so it just takes some time. The 175% increase over the same period last year, when 3 final orders took an average of 488 days to process from start to finish. Also, we had 2 cases closed without disciplinary action over this quarter, and these were probationers who filed petitions for early termination of probation, which were accepted, and these numbers are not included in the DCA performance measures as they are not considered formal discipline. No citations were issued for quarter 3. We had 1 new probationer and 2 probation completions. These were those individuals who petitioned for early termination. And at the end of the third quarter, we had 13 active probationers. The fiscal year to date, so that shows the 3 quarters so far of this year. shows that we are really close to our targets for complaint initiation and investigations. We're obviously a little high for the disciplinary numbers and what they want to see, but I think overall looking at how DCA is doing, we're still, right there. So again, there's a lot of those delays that are outside of our control at this point, but we do try to consistently follow up with them on these cases and see where we're at. Let's see here. We have 8 new cases initiated during quarters 1 through 3, compared to 2 cases last year. Word from the AG is that they are now under some new legislation that requires them to report more data. And so this has kind of lit a fire into them to get these accusations out more quickly. Again, case closure has those delays that are out of their control, but as far as accusations and initiating the cases, we're seeing a lot more coming out in a quicker time frame. So that's why we see such a higher number there. There's attachment E, which is the Attorney General case aging data, and this is showing the current cases the AG is working on for us. The first case has recently completed, and so that leaves us, I believe, with 12 cases that are currently in process over there. These numbers don't match the numbers that I report for case aging because they are going by the date that they receive it, so it doesn't include the complaint and investigation phases or timeframes. So it looks like it's closing a little quicker over there than on our end, where we have the full number from the date the complaint was opened until it's actually 30 days after the order is signed when it goes into effect. This time we have DCA performance measures included for quarter 1 and quarter 2. Quarter 3 has not yet been released, so that's not in this report. Hopefully be in the next one. There was one item that they neglected to put. We did have one new probationer. I believe it was quarter 1, and I informed them that it needs to be updated, but so anyways, not showing in that report at this time. Any questions on the statistics? Okay. Moving on to section 2, which is the probation program update. Our cost recovery, we've collected $10,677.79 during third quarter. And if you look over the averages of the past 5 years, we've averaged $7,513, so we're looking a little higher than average, and a total of $62,874.90 has been collected in cost recovery and probation monitoring to date for this fiscal year. I believe that is higher than what we collected all of last year, so doing a little better this time. Our probation monitor hiring, there was a time recently where we were a little worried that we weren't going to have probation monitors, but we were able to make a hire, Robin Hollis, who's already doing an excellent job, about a month on the job. She was hired, she's a prior division investigation investigator, and so she's now handling all of our Southern California cases. However, we're still going to have to look into another solution for this. Probably by 2019, we'll have to have something else in place, as Human Resources has informed us that the use of retired annuitants can only be for short-term needs. We've been using them since approximately 2008 when we took over probation from medical board. I was also just informed at a Human Resources training that they are starting to do audits on the retired annuitant usage, so we're definitely going to have to find another solution. Our thoughts at this time is looking into hiring a half-time position to handle all of the probation cases throughout the state. Any questions on the probation program? Segment 3 is the consultant and expert program update. I'm getting ready to hold the annual consultant training later this month on June 23rd. I'm currently finalizing the revised manual, and we have had 2 new consultants appointed at the last 2 board meetings. They will be in attendance, or so they've stated so far. so we'll be able to put them to work shortly after that. Also, coming up in a moment, there's 2 other additional consultants for your review, and they have also informed me that they should be able to attend that training. So that's good news to be able to have 4 additional people potentially to begin working these cases. Also, a little bit of unfortunate news. The Solid has let me know that the expert witness training that they were working on for online has been placed on hold temporarily. I don't know if it's other departmental needs or staffing issues, but they do say that they hope to still have it completed by the end of the year. Originally, it should have been done, the original timeline was this summer. So hopefully we get that going, because that would be really helpful, I think, not only to us, but to the rest of the department's experts in getting individuals trained. I also provided copies of our current manual and the medical board guidelines that I do also release to the experts, because it's almost exactly the same process, aside from a little bit of pay difference on what we pay our experts. And I gave copies of these to the enforcement committee, who had a chance to look it over and see what the experts, what information they're getting now. So. As far as, recruitment. CPMA did offer their assistance to help recruit. I believe a couple of our candidates did come from CPMA outreach. We are also continuing to advertise in our newsletter, and I'm hoping to get something up on the internet as soon as we have a little bit of additional time, just to, if anybody's going and checking our page, maybe right there on the first page, they can see links to consultant and expert applications and information on that. So hopefully I'll be able to have something like that up this year as well. And 2 new applications were received for the board to consider today. They do meet all of the requirements for consultants, and their CVs are attached, one of the attachments, a very lengthy one.
Very impressive.
So at this time, you guys can go ahead and give your vote on that. Enforcement Committee did make a recommendation to approve both candidates at our last meeting.
Before you entertain that motion, I just have one question of Bethany. With regards to conflicts of interest, I mean, the community of podiatrists in the state is really small. So has that been a real problem in your experience?
It comes up quite a bit. Fortunately, I think that our list is lengthy enough that I have generally been able to find either a consultant or an expert. One area that I have struggled with a little bit is in the area of practice monitoring. So sometimes when an individual is placed on probation, they have a condition, or they have to have a DPM practice monitor come in and review their files and their practice. Because there are so few DPMs throughout the state, and then only a limited number that are consultants and experts that can have this duty, sometimes it's difficult to find someone who is in the same location as the individual on probation. So I've had a couple of cases where there's individuals near Sacramento area that are on probation, but there's nobody in the Sacramento area that can do the practice monitoring duty. So I have to find someone from the Bay Area, the next closest location, to travel, and that increases, the time, the cost on the probationer. If they're having to travel maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours each way in order to do this practice monitoring. So that is, one issue that I've been running into recently. One of the new consultants is from the Sacramento area, so I think that could possibly help. But again, because it's a small community, when we're looking at the general area, a lot of them are going to know each other more if they're working in the same location. So I'm not really sure exactly how to resolve this issue.
Is that also true of specialization? Meaning, don't you want a monitor who's also very familiar with their particular practice, or is that not an issue?
Well, the good news is that when I sent out the survey for specializations, the majority of our consultants and experts pretty much checked every box. So most of them are doing almost everything within the scope of podiatric medicine. I don't think there's any that aren't, doing surgery or working on the ankle at this time. There are a few that are in Kaiser instead of private practice, so that's a consideration when we're assigning cases. And I have started sending out for each case that I'm assigning, making sure that they have an overview of what the case is about and that they have the right background and knowledge to review that type of case. So definitely consideration when making these assignments. And actually, item C goes over an overview of how these assignments are made. So again, it shows there must be no conflict of interest between the consultant or expert and the DPM being reviewed. A conflict would be if they're unable to make an impartial review, such as a current prior friendship, business relationship, or knowledge of the DPM that would cause them to have some bias. And then the other conflict would be a lack of knowledge and experience with the services provided. So that would be a conflict if they don't have the right experience to be reviewing that case.
Bethany, I have a question.
Thank you.
So who ultimately decides if there's a conflict of interest?
It's really up to the DPM because there's not really, I mean, they'll come back and say, I have this knowledge of them, or, you know, we attended school together, 30 years ago or something. And depending on the level of, their relationship, and also if I'm unable to find anybody else that has known, some of the DPMs are very well known, so almost anybody in the community would know who they are, but they may not have like a working relationship or a personal relationship with them. So as long as they think that they can give a unbiased, impartial review and don't have a close relationship, then usually there's not a problem. So it's both ends, really. They have to make a determination. Do they think they can give an impartial review? And also they check, with me on any interactions they may have had with them to see if that could be a conflict.
And that's gone over in detail in the training?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. I guess I can continue going over how the cases are assigned. Since
Well,
we're at
there's also the two consultants.
Right.
Right,
Want to do
sorry.
that first?
Keep you on
We
track.
were going to have a motion to accept our two consultants. Is there such a motion?
So
Ma-
moved.
Is there a second?
Mansdorf, second.
Any discussion?
I know both of these providers very well. They're competent podiatric physicians. I think they'd be a great addition to the consultant and expert pool.
And I appreciate the diversity.
We're working on that.
I appreciate that.
Any other comments? Dr. Mansdorf?
Mansdorf, aye.
Dixon, aye.
Saf, aye.
Elliot, aye.
Your consultants are approved.
Great. I'm looking forward to meeting our 4 new consultants at this upcoming training. Okay, so going on with how cases are assigned, in addition to there being no conflicts, keeping them from taking a case, they need to have the available time to conduct the review in a timely manner. Normally, we ask that they review and send in their reports within 30 days. Sometimes if there's extensive records, then they'll get additional time, or something unexpected comes up, then we allow additional time, but normally we want it about a 30-day turnaround. I also look at the distance between the consultant expert and the DPM being reviewed. If it's possible to get someone closer that doesn't have a conflict, then I do try to do that in case there's travel or interviews that they would like to have take place in person. Sometimes a phone interview can be arranged, but depending on the case, sometimes it's good to have them there in person. Also, some of our consultants and experts are used much more frequently than others, and there's a variety of reasons for this. Some are just very quick with their turnaround time. They just have a lot more time. They're free to take more cases. They always say yes. They don't have too many conflicts, and they just knock these cases out. I also look at the feedback that I've been getting back from the investigation and AG programs, and so those consultants and experts that get really high ratings, I do tend to use them a little more frequently than those that look like they need more training. If they need more training, I take that into consideration. We've been looking into the type of feedback that I can provide at this point to our consultants and experts when they are not meeting a higher standard. So as I'm getting these evaluation forms back, which they have been starting to come in, then I can approach our consultants and experts with any feedback on how they're doing, any additional training they may need, or if I want to refer them to a section of our manual or the medical board guidelines. And that was basically Section D, that the evaluation forms have been provided to the investigation and attorney general offices, and they are beginning to return those forms, so that's good to see. As we get more of them, I'll be probably inputting them into a spreadsheet and looking into the committee possibly doing some review as well with redacted information, but just to get more feedback from the board on how our consultants and experts are doing.
Yeah, that would be appreciated. I think the enforcement committee reviewing that would be helpful. And also, there had been some issues in the past that some board members were concerned about how things might have been reviewed by an expert. And if there was that concern, I think board members should also submit their own review to staff, and that'll be incorporated into their file.
Okay, well that concludes my report, so unless anyone has any additional questions on the enforcement program.
I have a comment and question. Well, first off, thank you very much for the great work you're doing. If SB 798 goes through in its current iteration or form, it looks like vertical enforcement may go away. And are we anticipating any savings from that?
There would probably be a small amount of savings. The amount of cases that go through vertical enforcement are only the cases that are sent to field investigation, which is a much smaller percentage of our overall cases. But those cases, whatever input that the AG may have along the way, which may be a couple of hours per case, then we would save, what is the AG rate right now? I probably around $200 or so an hour, but yeah, that we would see some savings. Might be a few thousand. I haven't really looked into the numbers, but of how many hours the AG is spending on our vertical enforcement cases. Probably wouldn't be anything astronomical, but we'd see some.
Okay, and we'll also see some improvement in handling the cases, the time for review?
It could speed up the cases by not having the AG involved. I have not worked in this position before there was vertical enforcement, so I have no way to compare. So I guess we'll just see when we reach that stage.
Yeah, in theory, this was supposed to be faster, but apparently it's not.
It was supposed to help improve the case overall and ensure that, all the boxes are being checked and anything that needed to be, looked into was looked into that would help an attorney to, present the case. So I think that whether we have vertical enforcement or not, we'll still be able to do a good job in handling our cases. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you very much.
That concludes my report.
Ms. Cooper, it's time for our legislative program and public education update.
Good morning, board members. I'm Kathleen Cooper here. And today we're going to be looking at proposed legislation that will deeply affect this board. The two bills are AB 1153, Assemblyman Lowe's bill that creates a scope change in the Business and Professions Code, Section 2472, which has a new subsection, subsection F, and this will allow doctors of podiatric medicine to perform wound care on the lower limb. So this bill, as far as its status, was read for the first time in the Senate this week on May 26th, and looks like it is going forward without opposition. So we can get into that in detail, but I just want to give a brief overview of what's in this report. The second bill is SB 798, which is Senator Hill's bill for the medical board that removes this board from the jurisdiction of the medical board and creates a third board in California, a third medical board. This bill is currently was read yesterday in the Assembly for the first time. So that's going forward pretty much in the form I think that it is now. It's gone through some various changes, but nothing that we didn't expect. And I just want to add that the Executive Committee has reviewed this in the last group of committee meetings, and as far as whether you would like to support, remain neutral, oppose, whatever you want to do, you might want to do that because the Executive Committee has already reviewed the substance. The Executive Committee comes right after this report. But as far as giving you any new information about the updates on these two bills, I'd be happy to do that if you have any questions.
John?
AI.
Yes, you may.
Mark Warford, California Board of Podiatric Medicine.
Gotta come to the mic.
Use the microphone.
Are these on? Yes. No. Yes, it is. Mark Warford, Board of Directors, member Podiatric, California Podiatric Medical Association. Based on the agenda that I just looked at, there's a more recent amendment to AB 1153, and that the reference to podiatric education and hospital staff privileging has been deleted from the most recent amendment. I wasn't sure if that had been mentioned in the most current. AB 1153 was amended 1 week ago, and it is now just a scope increase. There's no reference to that, the prior part that mentioned that hospital privileging will be related to residency training. That has been deleted.
I believe you have the latest in your.
Yeah, I think on
you might not have gotten it.
attachment D, I think is pretty consistent with the.
All right.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, we expect changes. Significant ones could come through the Senate on the Assembly bill or the opposite. But I can tell you that we are watching it, and we do get the notifications. And the main idea of us being removed from the medical board is intact. As far as 1153, the main idea that you're doing the work from the tubercle, the tibial tubercle. Am I saying that correctly? And down is still intact. So as far as specifics as to residency programs, maybe we can go back to the licensing section if you have any questions and get a report to you, being that this is the last time we'll meet prior to the legislation going through. Maybe you can defer to Mr. Naslin and the Executive Committee or however you'd like to do that to respond to any last-minute updates. But as I say, the Executive Committee has dealt with this in committee and will probably be the best place to discuss whether you're supporting it or supporting it with amendments. If I may, I'll go on to the rest of the report. Okay. So as far as regulations, you just approved the minutes from March, which had an oral argument section in it, which you changed to go back to the original written document. So that will be going forward. Disciplinary guidelines is a large bit of work that will be involving legal enforcement, the executive officer, Brian Naslin, and myself, Bethany, and Gary. So we're looking forward to hopefully getting that off the ground before our next meeting. And the acupuncture and acupressure issues have been resolved. We had that regulation successfully put into the code. As far as any other regulatory matters, I don't think there's anything the board wants to bring up of things they would like to have changed or updated. Please let us know. But right now, the status is very good. Everything's going through with the Office of Administrative Law as expected. And The last part of my report is the public education program, which right now at this time is basically the footnotes, which you have in front of you. And I just want to thank all the contributors, and that includes quite a wide range of the stakeholders in the California world of podiatric medicine. Dr. Harkless and his assistant Margaret were essential in getting the articles that were from students. They helped us with a lot of the photos. Bethany DeAngelis took some great photos we were able to use, and we look forward next year to doing the same type of outreach with the Samuel Merritt School for the next meeting in March. So your next March meeting will be in the Bay Area, if all things work out the way we're hoping. And I have a little update here from Cures, and I just want to mention that last year at this time, I think we were in the 850 range. So that's 200 plus registrations in the last year, which I think is fantastic. I mean, it's a huge jump up. And, we don't know how many have DEA licenses. That's a very interesting indicator. We were just looking at it more like who is actually doing surgery and giving these drugs, and maybe some of your colleagues are not, and that's why they feel they don't have a need to register. I don't think anyone in the DPM community does not know about this. We've even used CPMA's magazine that's coming out at the June meeting, and they are very helpful to us in getting the word out, and it's on our website. I think the people that haven't registered might feel that they're just not in that group of people that are making those prescriptions. But anyway, just to summarize the Cures update on my report, shows such a huge increase from last year at this time. So if there's any comments, or if you'd like to deal with the voting on this for the executive committee as far as the two bills, I will defer to
We'll
Brian.
defer that to the executive committee.
Okay.
You want to postpone that until the executive? Was there any discussion about the two bills? Any questions?
Yeah, we had a discussion, I'm looking at the California Medical Association letter to Senator Hill about their objection of using the word physician and surgeon in regarding to podiatrists. We sort of made an executive decision to take that out to resolve this. Is there any discussion of that among the board?
So what's going to happen there is it's just reverting back to the original law. So it was just, there's going to be quite a bit of opposition with 2474 with the doctors of podiatric physician and surgeon language. So I believe that will be attempted another day. So we're just reverting back to the original language as it was in 2054. No change.
Just wanted to hear if there's any differing opinion among the board. Okay.
Actually, a question, because we have CPMA present here, and this was CPMA's legislation, correct?
Which, are you referring to AB 11?
Mark
Correct.
Warford,
CPMA?
Correct. So it's CPMA's recommendation that this be taken out, and we're asking for BPM approval of the change in language, or whether we support or are against the elimination of podiatric physician and surgeon from the language.
The discussion of that phraseology, I guess, was brought up, and I feel that due to primarily the strong resistance of the CMA was the reason that we did not include such language in AB 1153. The board is free to make whatever suggestions that they want in regards to Senator Hill's legislation and on SB 798. We probably would be considered kind of neutral on that, but we're certainly aware of the strong resistance that it was going to be subjected to from California Medical Association. And that's why we did not include such language in AB 1153. It was a deal breaker.
Thank you.
Did I answer your question, Dr. Mansdorf?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the legislative or public education program?
I just have a comment. I wanted to echo the sentiments thanking all the contributors to the footnotes. At the meeting in March, several of the students were very excited about contributing, and they, in fact, were very proactive in making sure that their articles made the publication. So we want to thank them and also encourage others to send in information. I think it makes it a much more rich and interesting piece of information if we have contributions from a wide range of people. So I think it's good. I like the pictures. So I think we're on to something with the publication. Also for the legislation, I wonder if I could kind of challenge staff with thinking about ways to kind of condense the information that we're providing to the board as far as the legislation. And if there's a way for us to do a legislative analysis that kind of takes all of that's being presented and puts it from a BPM perspective. I mean, it's good to have the context from the Senate or the Assembly, but it would be nice to have for our public members an assessment of the bills from our perspective. So I'm happy to help frame that a little bit better, but I just feel like we need to, if we're going to start taking positions or just looking at legislation more deeply, then we should be doing analysis of the bills ourselves and putting that out there.
Thank you for that offer. We can do that.
And just a reminder too, for the footnotes upcoming for the next edition, suggestions highly welcomed.
And I think I found one error, so talk to me before you leave.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Mr. Laisland, we're going to move on to the executive management report.
All right. Is everybody doing good? Any breaks needed before we do this, or this is kind of our last one before we go to closed session?
I think we'll just keep pushing on.
Okay, sounds good. So back on May 10th, the executive committee met, and I kind of summarized the minutes of that meeting. We had 3 things come up during that executive committee, which had 3 members, the president, vice president, and secretary of the board. So we had a discussion about SB 1153, and 1153 was voted on by the executive committee to support. President Zaff, do you want to open it up for conversation or discussion with other board members?
1153 is the bill put forward by the California Podiatric Medical Association, and it has been revised since we even voted on it, and it's going to basically allow podiatrists to codify what they've been doing, which is taking care of ulcerations that occur on the leg between the knee and the ankle. And it sounded to me like an appropriate, it sounded to me like licensing something that every podiatrist I know is already forced to do. These ulcers just pop up, and you can't stop treating the ones you're treating and ignore the one that popped up, and you can't ask the patient to go to 2 different doctors. And very few doctors want to treat these wounds, so it seems like an appropriate thing to allow the podiatric medical doctors to do, since they've been thoroughly trained to do this, and they're only going to be allowed to do it if they're trained to do it. So I urge us to support AB 1153. In fact, I'll make a motion that the Board of Podiatric Medicine support AB 1153. Is there a second?
Mansdorf, second.
Any discussion?
Is there a plan maybe to send a support letter from the chair? Is that something that we know
Yes,
about
that's
yet?
what, if we get whatever the position comes out on this vote, then BPM will correspond with authors of whatever is decided on.
You know, that would probably have to be contingent upon any further changes in the bill.
Right.
So as it
reads
as it
now.
reads today, we would support the bill,
Okay.
according to my motion.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
More discussion? Let's call.
Second.
Mansdorf.
Can make a motion.
So let's start from Dr. Mansdorf.
Mansdorf, aye.
Dixon, I.
Zaff, aye.
Elliot, aye.
Thank you all.
Okay, duly noted. DPM will create a letter of support as the legislation reads as is now, and we'll get your
Yeah.
approval on that once drafted.
Point of information, what do we do if the language changes yet again?
Then we go into another vote of support, unless amended.
And how would we do that? Because it'll-
I'll just call a meeting with the
It'd be a
executive.
special meeting of the
Special.
board.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'd probably be by teleconference.
Okay.
Teleconference, perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on to SB 798. Same thing here, pretty robust discussion on this. Nothing has really changed in the bill. The separation is reading everything that we've asked for in lieu of 2474 physicians and surgeons language. We're reverting back to the original language in 2054. That was a motion to pass for support, and it's up for discussion again with the board members.
And that was
President
without a written agreement for shared services and without using the phrase podiatric physician and surgeon. Any discussion? Well, I'll make a motion that we support SB 798 as currently written. Is there a second?
Second. Dixon, second.
Any further discussion? Dr. Mansdorf?
Mansdorf, aye.
Dixon, I.
Zaff, aye.
Elliot, aye.
And that motion passes.
Okay, duly noted. DPM will do the same. Follow up with a letter of support as the language sticks as the bill now, and if anything changes, we'll summons a special meeting. And for the big one of the day, and this is just, we talked about, we've been having some problems about the board members and their attendance logs. So, brought it up during the executive meeting, and I think it would be your last page, or second last page. The executive committee approved this new easy form, which is going to be replaced by the other monster form on the front side of it. Dr. Zapp, here again, you can have discussion with your board if there needs to be. If not, or any questions about this new activity log? If not, I think we're good to go.
So we're going to have a motion to accept the use of this simplified form. And I'll make that motion to accept the attachment C as a alternative form for us to document our expenses.
And I'll second that. Elliot?
Discussion?
This form's much preferable. Thank you.
So I just want to go on record because it was, I think I brought forth the form. So the history behind the form was there was a shift in the way that the per diems were being allocated. And so this was a starting point, which you acknowledge in your notice. And so I do appreciate that we're looking at ways to make our processes more efficient, which is what it's all about. And so I think that this is a great transition. The first form was just kind of a starting point for us, just to make sure that, we were showing all the work that we are doing outside of coming to the meetings, because there was a challenge in the way that we were getting, noted for that. So I support the change, and I think that it's a great way to make it more efficient.
Any further discussion? Dr. Mansdorf.
Mansdorf, aye.
Dixon, aye.
Zaff, aye.
Elliot, aye.
And our new form is now official.
That's all I got.
That concludes your executive manager report?
It does.
Okay, so I would like to,
A question.
I think
Uh,
Dr.
oh.
Mazur has a question.
Well, it's still part of the executive management. If a couple of requests, one that we get the board books a week prior, not 3 days prior to a meeting if possible. And also for a closed session, at least an email of what case we might be discussing.
Okay.
And then also, these board packets have been a work in progress. Please number pages.
Yes.
Second, can we find a better way to bind them? Because I think it's hard for us to keep track of it. I know that we went from binding to not binding, but can we just kind of figure out a way to make it easier for us to keep track? Because, it's kind of a challenge.
well, I enjoy being able to move pages around a little bit. And so as long as they're numbered consecutively,
Yes.
Okay,
so
that
I
could
can
be the
find out where it
compromise.
goes back to,
Yes.
then
the
I'd be
numbering-
happy with that.
The numbering I would also
Especially
suggest.
when two different items are back to back on the same page, you're not sure where that page goes.
Yes.
So between sections, I think a blank page wouldn't be a terrible idea.
And even maybe a header?
So I can put a paper clip on each section and keep it by itself.
Agreed.
I agree.
All right, I think you guys, this board's in closed session? Or should we do future
So now-
agenda items?
So we need, I think it's appropriate for a motion to accept all of our reports. So I'd like to hear a motion to accept all four of our executive officers' reports, all parts of it.
So moved. Dixon?
Second, Elliot.
Let's start with Ms. Elliott this time.
Elliot, aye.
Zaff, aye.
Dixon, aye.
Mansdorf, aye.
Well, thank you. So 11:28 ends our open session, this portion of our open session. In 5 minutes, we'll begin our closed session.